CNN tries to lay out their best propaganda tricks to try to convince their viewers that Tim Walz is just a good old farm boy, moderate centrist, but they learned a valuable lesson when they let their own conservative contributors actually tell the truth on air. You're going to love that. And MSNBC is so in love with Tim Walz, they want to knock boots with him immediately. They want to go full Kamala to Willie Brown, but it's pretty gross. We're going to show you what they're up to. And JD Vance talks sense to everybody this morning about who Tim Walz is, who Kamala Harris is, and why he was the right pick for Donald Trump. We got all that and a whole lot more. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. Thanks for watching on the live stream. We're at Rumble and YouTube and X and Facebook, and I don't even know. I have lost track where we're doing this thing right now. I'm just glad you're there and you're watching, whether it's live at noon or if you're watching us after the fact. Thank you so much for being there. Please do like and subscribe and get notifications on this so you don't miss another episode, because things are getting pretty serious now. We got to stick together through it. All right, here's what it looked like on CNN last night when they had their big rally in Philadelphia. CNN actually had a little perch there, like they were covering a convention. Did you see that? And Dana Bash began the conversation with our fave, Scott Jennings, who we like to fanboy over, started the conversation by saying, Tim Walz's superpower is he's just so normal. And that's when Scott Jennings, he went full ninja on her.
His friends told me this morning that his superpower is how normal he is.
Is he? I mean, I don't know. I don't know this guy. I mean, is it normal to let your biggest city in your state burn while you're the governor for 4 days, destroying thousands of businesses, hundreds of millions of dollars in property damage while you do nothing? Does that sound normal? Is it normal for your wife to say she opened the window so she could let the smell of tire fires waft in so they could take in the smells of this radical chaos and anarchy on the streets of Minneapolis? I don't view any of that as normal. I look at this through the lens of decision making. And in two cases, they've showed us who they are. Kamala Harris absolutely bowed down to the radical left in her party by not picking Shapiro, who is Jewish. There was a nasty campaign run against him. Everybody knows it. No one wants to admit it, but everybody knows it. And she wound up choosing the person who was not Jewish and not as talented and not from the state that she has to win. He did a nice job tonight. Everybody could see why he was the best choice, but she couldn't do it because the party is somewhat awash in anti-Semitism. And for Walz, when he did what he did during the riots, to me, it was him saying, I don't have the strength or the character to stand up to this anarchy. So in two big decision points for this ticket, they've showed us they will always bow down to the radical left. So I think if you want to talk about normal, to the normal people in this country, bowing down to the radical left is not normal. It shouldn't be normal, and it should be a flashing red light to the normies of America that this is not the ticket for you.
Yeah, that's right. There's nothing normal about this. By the way, I do want to point out something if you missed it. It tells you everything you need to know about CNN because, listen, we love that Scott Jennings is there, and we love that he does such a good job with them. But take a look at this real fast. And he does a great job. And he's the only reason, if you're tuning into CNN, which I know you're not, but you're just waiting to see Scott Jennings clips here. But take a look at the panel. Here's Scott Jennings right here. Okay. Lefty. Faux pretend Republican Alyssa Griffin, who is now a lefty on The View. Dana Bash, host of the show, lefty. David Axelrod, lefty. Jamie Ganglo, lefty. They're all lefties. He's the only one, and he's the only one that makes sense. And he is fearless in laying out exactly what he laid out there. There's nothing normal about Tim Walz, nothing at all. In fact, you heard him mention his wife proudly saying that she rolled down the windows in her house to smell the burning of their own city during the riots. And he wasn't exaggerating.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
Yeah, that's the touchstone of what was happening, all right. Safe behind the walls of the secured governor's mansion with armed bodyguards and layers of security fences. I took my windows down so I could smell the burning tires of innocent Minnesotans whose businesses and homes, 1,500 of them, were left in ashes and rubble, their life savings destroyed. But I bathed myself in the incense of black rage and my own white guilt, laying there knowing that the mob could never make their way to my home, which was well protected. These people are sick, and there's nothing normal about that at all. Listen, I'm from Michigan, right here originally. And I know as a Michigander, and I know my Badger friends in Wisconsin, even those Buckeyes in Ohio, which I do acknowledge are Midwestern brothers when I have to, except for that one day a year when our football teams play each other. I know that we know better about this guy. They really believe that this guy is going to appeal to, these just normal Midwestern blue collar, plain speaking folk, right? Because he's not an elite city slicker like all the other Democrats you hate. This guy's the ticket. Really? Really? I have a hunch based on our YouTube stats and based on reading your comments, our Rumble stats, reading your comments at Rumble. I have a hunch that there's quite a few Midwesterners out there, Wisconsinites, Michiganders, maybe even some of you in Western Pennsylvania, which isn't technically the Midwest, but well, we let you play in the Big Ten with Penn State, so you're honorary. I have a feeling you're not buying any of this, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments there, because this ain't working. This guy, you just saw, no normal Midwesterner says what he says, does what he does, and no normal Midwesterner is like his wife there. And there's one thing that Scott Jennings left out of the far from normal litany of things that Tim Walz is responsible for, but I forgive him because it really was just revealed this morning. We talked yesterday about his radical LGBTQ agenda that he jammed through the state via executive order, not via legislation. But this morning, it's been revealed that he actually championed a change to a definition in Minnesota state code having to do with defining sexual preference. Take a look at this. Section 47, Minnesota Statutes 2022, Sections 363A.03, Subdivision 44. It defines what sexual orientation means. Now, I'll hop down to the new language that he proposed. Sexual orientation means to whom someone is or is perceived of as being emotionally, physically, or sexually attracted to based on sex or gender identity. A person may be attracted to men, women, both, neither, or to people who are genderqueer, androgynous, or have other gender identities. Now, most people reading that on the face of it think, yeah, that sounds about right. But that would be most normal people. I mean, you can take it or leave it as to whether what we just read is normal. But what I'm saying is most normal observers to that language of sexual orientation would say, yeah, that about covers it. But that's because most normal, excuse me. But that's because most normal people take for granted that sexual orientation and emotional, physical, sexual attraction is specifically limited to adults. Adults sexually or physically or emotionally attracted to other adults. You see, most normal people take that for granted, so that definition is enough. But I now draw your attention to what's been eliminated from the statute. Because what was eliminated before Governor Tim Walz decided to rewrite normalcy in Minnesota is this last line here. If you can see it, sexual orientation does not include a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult. They eliminated that. They eliminated that. Years ago in Minnesota, they recognized that at the very least, as we define what sexual orientation means, and we open up the door to involve so many various new examples of what people are sexually, physically, or emotionally attracted to, and for some reason state law has to protect them, at the very least, let's keep this one line in here that does not allow protection or any kind of acceptance, or let's go back to that word Dana Bash used, normalcy, to an adult who has a physical, emotional, or sexual attraction to a child. The statute used to say sexual orientation does not include a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult. That was removed, thanks to normal guy, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. And it did not go unnoticed at the time. This is a Republican state legislator at the time. His name is Harry Niska. This is just last year, by the way. So it's not like, oh, that's ancient history. Oh, that's Tim. Well, that's years ago. Things have changed. This was last year. And Representative Niska took exception at the time.
We heard no good reason not to close the loophole to potentially open the door in some future case that someone could argue there's a protected class for those adults who are attracted to kids. No good reason. We did hear, and I will grant Representative Finke, we did hear good reason not to have it in the sexual orientation definition. I will grant that. I understand that argument. But we voted 126-0 to solve that problem in a different way. And there was no good reason given on this floor as to why we can't do that. What we heard, what we know, is that there are some, maybe in the administration, maybe in the other chamber, who have put ideological blinders on and are convinced or refuse to acknowledge the possibility that they're creating a problem with this bill without that protective language in the bill. But we've tried to work on maybe another solution. And again, that is whether it's resistance in the administration or in the other body, that's something that this ruling Democrat trifecta refuses to do. It's irresponsible. It's reckless. It's dangerous for the future of Minnesota.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, that's normal. That's Minnesota nice. He's way too nice, by the way, given what was being jammed down their throats there. And you heard him talk about the Minnesota Democrat trifecta. That means Democrats were completely in charge of the executive branch in both chambers of their legislature. And that's what happens when Democrats have unmitigated power to do whatever they want. They decide to redefine sexual orientation to not include a prohibition against adults having a sexual, physical, or emotional attraction to a child. But no. Tim Walz is normal. That's what Dana Bash tells me. That's what all my betters, intellectual, ethical, and moral betters in the mainstream corporate-owned media tell me. He's normal. He's just a normal guy. All right. If you're making the case that he's all about normal, then I think it's fair to scrutinize pretty much everything he does, including this moment. Did you see this? It played there while Scott Jennings was talking, but I want to draw attention to it because as the spouses were all hugging and kissing each other, normal guy Tim Walz held out his hand to shake his wife's. She insisted on a hug. What is that exactly? That's normal? It's kind of a big moment, kind of an emotional moment. Put her there. All right, listen, maybe he was just pulling her away from sexual predator Doug Emhoff, trying to get her out of the line of fire there, because we know Doug's history now. Although, to be fair, I think she's a little old for his taste. He likes to go after the babysitter. Moving on, there's a whole lot more normalcy going on with this guy, as Lee Zeldin pointed out at CNN, because he's so damn normal, that Tim Walz. What with the letting your city burn and removing any reference to opposition to pedophilia. You can't get more normal than that. That's just Minnesota normal.
he was talking about loving your neighbors. During COVID, he had a hotline to snitch on your neighbors. There was 10,000 of these complaints that were coming in. And I would say, as far as the weird argument, and keep throwing this weird around, I mean, he was signing legislation that was requiring taxpayer-funded distribution of tampons in boys' bathrooms in elementary schools. So if you want to go there, and we're going to start having a debate about weird, I mean, it's not like he has clean hands here. Again, I think at the end of the day, though, rather than going back and forth on what's weirder, I think we should just talk about who's going to solve the issues that voters say are their top issues for the future of this country.
Well, that's true. But as Lee Zeldin said, if they continue to repeat this mantra that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are weird and they're just so normal, then maybe we should question why boys' bathrooms in public schools in Minnesota need tampons. Worth a discussion? Explain yourself, Mr. Governor. And would you take that national, by the way, with your role in the federal government? Fair to ask, I think. And yes, absolutely. He made a big point there talking about how in Minnesota, we have the golden rule. By the way, any believing Christian with more than a second grade education knows that the golden rule is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But yesterday we saw Tim Walz rewrite the golden rule, normal Minnesota style. He told us that the new golden rule that they adhere to is mind your own damn business, which, forgive me, is very different than the Christian understanding of do unto others. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, I assure you, does not translate in any Bible to mind your own damn business. But while Tim Walz was lying to the American people, telling them that in Minnesota he instituted an ethic of mind your own damn business, yes, he literally set up an agency with a 24/7 hotline for people to call into and snitch on their neighbors if they were not adhering to the authoritarian, totalitarian mandates that Governor Walz, with his singular power during the pandemic, instituted, thus destroying children's lives and many other adults' lives as well. One other thing about his actions during the pandemic, he did lift restrictions on funerals, which was a really wonderful, heartwarming thing. I know a lot of you, myself included, had a loved one who died during the pandemic, and you could not go to a normal funeral to mourn over the death of your loved one. And that was awful. It was disgusting. It was despicable. It was inhumane. It was so wrong. But Tim Walz, I got to hand it to him because he's so normal. He lifted that restriction. Well, to be fair, he lifted the restriction once, one day, at one time, for one funeral, the funeral of George Floyd. That was the only funeral that was allowed in Minnesota during the pandemic. And of course, it turned into a political rally. It wasn't really a funeral. But that was okay because it was 2020 and it was the summer of rage and justice. And they had an election to win. See, they needed people as angry as humanly possible going into the November election because up until that time, people were actually pretty happy. And they couldn't have that. How do you defeat Donald Trump if people are happy? So you betcha. Don't worry about the pandemic. You can have your funeral because it's going to be all about rage and race. But that's a nice twofer that normal Tim Walz was just fine with. We finish our CNN analysis with a remarkable exchange over the man who didn't get the nod. You see, this rally was in Philadelphia, and the intro speech was one Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. And he was great. In fact, he was much better than Tim Walz. He was the obvious pick. As a Republican, I told you yesterday, I'm breathing a sigh of relief today that Kamala Harris didn't do the smart thing, didn't do the brave thing, that she didn't pick Josh Shapiro. Good. I'm glad. Josh Shapiro was formidable. Josh Shapiro would have taken Pennsylvania off the map for Trump and the Republicans. Josh Shapiro would have sent a signal that the anti-Semites who run the Democrat Party right now are not in charge. But she didn't do that. And on CNN, They had a brief moment of accidental truth seep through their analysis. And it's amazing.
And I think ultimately, Shapiro, I think fit is important. But, I also think that when you look at the principle of do no harm, maybe they did say, in a state like Minnesota, do we want to, those 100,000 uncommitted voters who came out about the Gaza war, do we want to antagonize those voters? Those are all part of the questions as well.
So, but can I just say,
now, we'll pause there for a second because the conversation now takes a little bit of a tangent, but Jake Tapper, God bless him, he actually brings it back into focus. But you just saw Abby Phillips there stammering her way through, trying to find the right euphemism. You know, the activists who have concerns about the Gaza war. I love they call it the Gaza war. I'm sorry. You mean the retaliation against the October 7th terrorist atrocity that murdered over 1,000 innocent people because they were Jewish, that still results in the captivity of American citizens as well as Israeli citizens who are being tortured and sexually abused on a daily basis? Is that what you mean by the Gaza war? Activists who have concern over the Gaza war. That's a hell of a euphemism. And thank you, Abby, for having to stammer your way to find those words. I'd love to know what was going on with the gerbil on the hamster wheel there, running around in her brain, trying to come up with the right way to put it. And now watch, we'll go off on a little tangent. And then Jake Tapper says, well, let's talk about Shapiro one more time here.
Tim Walz also spoke conciliatory those people. He said, look, that uncommitted vote is significant and those people should be heard. So having that kind of response, I think, is probably more of an open door to the parts of the party that have been very frustrated with the Democrats.
So, but just to one point on the Gaza war, Shapiro has the same position on Israel that Governor Walz, that Senator Kelly has. He's actually been more critical of Netanyahu than the other two, but he is Jewish.
The viewers of CNN were probably just absolutely shocked. They were probably checking, is this really CNN? Did we just hear something true and frank uttered by somebody other than Scott Jennings and Lee Zeldin? What is going on here? He has the exact, it has to do with the activists on the Gaza war. Josh Shapiro on paper has the exact same record and position on the war and on Netanyahu and on the state of Israel as every other contender for Kamala Harris's running mate. Sadly, lamentably, it's a disgusting position. It's an immoral position. It's an un-American position, but it is the same position as the Democrats. But why is Shapiro different? And there, Jake Tapper had to say it. The only difference is he's Jewish. I love the fact that he said, but he's Jewish. Because that's a problem, you see. And then, again, Abby Phillips tries to clean it up a little bit here, but everyone knows exactly what happened. And even on CNN, the truth had to explode right under their feet, like a flaming bag of dog poop on your doorstep.
He's also the face of the crackdown on the protests, right? He spoke very vehemently about those campus protests as being anti-Semitic.
Not all of them. The ones that were anti-Semitic, he criticized as being anti-Semitic.
He was out front on the issue. So I'm wondering if that's the kind of thing that, again, for the activist wing of the party, they felt was a slap in the face.
Yeah, it was a slight. Understand what this is her actually trying to, clean it up a little bit for the anti-Semites in the Democrat Party. No, it's not because he was Jewish. It was because he was the face of the opposition of the protests. And Tapper says, well, the anti-Semitic protests. Well, yeah, but because he identified accurately the anti-Semitism of the anti-Semitic protests, well, that didn't wash with the activists in the party. In other words, when you call anti-Semites, you have no future with the Democrats. Remind me again how Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Republican voters are the Nazis. Remind me again how the man who moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem stood by Israel at all costs and actually engineered the Abraham Accords, where Arab nations finally made peace agreements with the state of Israel, how he's the second coming of the Third Reich, how he's the fascist, how he's a Nazi, how he's an anti-Semite, how he's a Jew hater. You know the one I'm talking about, the one whose daughter converted to Judaism and whose grandchildren are in fact Jewish. That's the one. Yeah. Listen, Tim Walz is just a normal guy, man. He's just a normal Midwestern guy with normal Midwestern positions. CNN just told me so. And more importantly than him being a normal Midwestern guy, he isn't a Jew. We're Democrats. In these crazy times, there's a peace of mind in security. God knows, security for our country, security for our leaders, and security for our families. Think about it. You are not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket. We learned that this week, didn't we? Gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation. They're a physical asset that is in high demand globally, from the wealthy to central banks to, well, to you and me. Through my friends at Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. You can diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. It's one thing you can do to secure your family's savings. So be proactive about this. Text my name, Larry, L-A-R-R-Y, to 989898 and receive a free no-obligation info kit. Learn the role precious metals play in your overall savings strategy. Again, text Larry to 989898. By the way, Birch Gold, they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers. You can trust Birch Gold, just like I do. Text Larry, 989898. Do that now. Now,
Joe, that's a very interesting observation that you just
shush. Nobody told you to start talking. Nobody told. Hey, what the hell happened there? Sorry. I have to yell at my computer sometimes. You know how it is. You know, Kevin, people think we have a whole crew that does this show. We should let them see how the show is done behind the scenes sometime. Should we set up like behind the scenes cameras and like let them see because it's not a big team.
Yeah, maybe you should tweet a picture and let people know.
I don't know. Actually, you know what? We look so professional and so like sort of high end, and I think we should keep the illusion going. Anyway, I should come up with names for people who are non-existent on the crew. So when something like that happens, I can say, "Hey, Jimmy, could you stop that video, please? It shouldn't be playing right now." All right, let's try this again. Earlier this month, I coined the phrase "Kamalagasms" for all the excitement over on MSNBC over the new Democrat nominee for president. You know, the one that was placed there after unconstitutionally, undemocratically, un-Americanly, the actual winner of the Democrat nomination for president was forcibly, against his will, removed from contention, and a small handful of politically powerful people and very wealthy donors handpicked Kamala Harris and placed her in her position now. It doesn't matter how they're going to use their totalitarian tactics to save democracy, as long as they save democracy, right? Absolutely right. And they love them some Kamala. Kamalagasms, multiple Kamalagasms everywhere whenever she appears. Well, now that Tim Walz has been selected, they are going into hyperdrive with all the can we call them Walzgasms now? Call them, I don't know what it is. It's a threesome of some sort. But you should see Mike Barnacle today on Morning Joe doing his Meg Ryan impersonation from When Harry Met Sally. You know, in the deli scene, I'll have what she's having. Take a look.
You know, Joe, that's a very interesting observation that you just pointed out, the Reagan campaign of 1980. Watching the coach, and I'm going to call him the coach from now until Election Day, watching the coach yesterday and watching the vice president yesterday, It was mesmerizing in the sense that it's been a while since I've seen a rally like that, either on TV or in person. And watching it, you could just sense the power in the hall. And it was the power of joy, the power of laughter, the power of hope for the future, but especially the power of those who were in the hall and those who were thinking or considering voting for this ticket, the vice president and the coach. For those considering voting for the ticket, giving them the power to think that they're participating in something that will put a smile on your face. It's been a long time since any aspect of American politics has put a smile on anyone's face. And these two people yesterday managed to put a smile on the nation's face.
Sorry. Just sort of get overcome there. Somebody give him a cold towelette, maybe a cigarette as he basks in the afterglow. Good Lord, what did we just watch? Dude, chill out. He's like Pee Wee Herman at the movie theater. Also, I don't know if you caught the veiled sort of backhanded shade that he's throwing. Certainly, he's criticizing Joe Biden there. It's been a long time. But is this also not a slam at Hillary Clinton? I mean, it hasn't been that long since Hillary Clinton, a transcendent political figure that we were lucky enough to have in our presence. How dare us not make her president? It wasn't that long ago that Hillary Clinton was doing rallies, but Barnacle's like, I can't remember a time when I felt this way. I guess they're now finally telling you the truth about what they thought about Hillary Clinton. I wonder how long it's going to take them for them to tell us the truth about what they really feel about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. This is how they do what they do. But again, as merely a political observer, just like you, I watch this and think to myself, where the hell have you people been? It's been a long time since a political rally has put a smile on anybody's face. There's a lot of people smiling at Trump rallies. A lot. But see, to their minds, in their eyes, with their perspective, you aren't anybody. Those are the words he used. It's been a long time since a political rally like that yesterday put a smile on anybody's face. What he means is anybody we know, anybody we like, or anybody we respect. But see, their job is to actually tell their viewers the truth. If they were honest, they would have said, it's been a long time for a Democrat rally to put a smile on anyone's face at a Democrat rally, or to put a smile on any Democrat's face. But they pretend like you don't exist because in their mind, you don't exist, or you don't legitimately exist. I mean, after all, look at what you believe, look at who you support, and look at who you intend to vote for. You don't have the right to have a voice in American politics. So they talk like you aren't even there. That's assuming Mike Barnacle actually believes what he said. My hunch is that Mike Barnacle knows exactly who the audience there is on Morning Joe. He knows exactly who the hosts are there on Morning Joe. And he knows exactly who the executives in charge of MSNBC and NBC News writ large at 30 Rock, at Universal Comcast are. And so he says what he needs to say to keep that gig. It's a cushy little gig, let's face it. It's not like he can go back to cranking out columns all the time. Mike Barnacle is a plagiarist. Oh, yeah. In your free time, just go to your favorite search engine and type in Mike Barnacle plagiarism. It doesn't matter when you're on Morning Joe. He's got his gig. It's fine. But geez, Mike, put it back in your pants, will you? That's just embarrassing. But beyond embarrassing is Molly Jong Fast, who, by the way, is not Chinese. It's like that Seinfeld episode, right? When Jerry dates the woman who he thinks is Chinese and she's Jewish, but she has a Chinese name. And he feels gypped. He feels, it's like when you see the byline Molly Jong Fast, and it's like, well, at the very least, she's got to be, sort of biracial. Let's tune in. What the hell is that? It's Molly Jong Fast. Anyway, Molly Jong-Fast is a radical New York leftist. And in the eyes of a radical New York leftist who never leaves the confines of Manhattan, unless maybe to go to San Francisco or LA, in her mind, from her perspective, Tim Walz is a hee-haw loving, pickup driving, redneck hick. Watch and laugh at this.
So I have interviewed Tim Walz before, so I knew what he could do. And I feel like and Democratic governors knew what he could do because he was the head of the Democratic Governors Association. So when I saw that he was in contention, and he called me and said he was in contention, and I thought to myself, this guy is really a good orator. And what I thought was that it was a reach out to rural voters, because here's a guy. Hold on.
Selecting Tim Walz as your running mate. Tim Walz, the guy who took a knee to the George Floyd rioters, to the mob, took a knee and let Minneapolis and St. Paul burn to the ground, and then apologized for his white privilege. The man who single-handedly rewrote laws in Minnesota so parents could bring their children there and chemically castrate them, and lined out any description that involved pedophilia from being not conducive to a definition of a sexual preference. The man who has embraced sanctuary city policies so that illegal aliens entering this country illegally can run rampant across an American city, taking jobs, draining resources. A man who has allowed tent cities in his major urban centers to fester and go out of control, with homeless criminal vagrants taking up residence. Selecting that guy as your running mate is a signal to rural America. That's the crack analysis you're getting on MSNBC. This is Kamala Harris reaching out to rural America by picking the champion of the summer of rage and Black Lives Matter riots. That's a signal that she really wants to reach to those rural voters. And she goes on with this delusion. I don't know if she is, in fact, this stupid to believe this, or she's that good a liar. To the viewers on MSNBC, who, by the way, are also basically New York, D.C. liberals as well. They never leave their cities. And so I guess she's preaching to the MSNBC choir. Sadly, I hate to use religious references because God knows none of them actually attend church. But to their minds, this really, look, he wears a flannel shirt and he goes hunting. So clearly, this is a selection for rural America, because that's all those people care about. They don't actually read. They have no concept of policies or politics or laws. They're stupid rednecks. I don't even think they can read. Put them in a flannel shirt, show them with a camo hunting cap, and you'll win. That's how stupid they think you are.
He ice fishes. He's a hunter. He does butter carving, which, again, is not such a popular thing in urban areas. I mean, he's really a sort of, he is a rural person. And, he went to college on the GI Bill. He was the highest ranking enlisted man. This is a person who is really part of this rural America. And he really makes the case for how government programs can help people. His father died when he was young and he enlisted in the Army to pay for college. And I think that is a really important, we don't necessarily hear that message so much in politics today. And so I really do think, I sort of thought in my head, this guy, he really is kind of a rural American success story. And remember, he was born in Kansas, so he has really part of rural America.
I mean, again, anybody who actually is part of rural America who's watching, anybody who actually identifies as a rural American, I'd love for you to react to that if you could on the comment section there, because I don't think there's much rural going on with Tim Walz in terms of who he is, what he stands for, what he's done, what he believes, and what he promises to do if he's the vice president. And by the way, there's one other thing here that you may have missed, but I have a keen ear for this sort of thing. Did you see how Molly Jong Fast let out that Tim Walz called her to let her know that he was in contention? Did you catch that? And then they had, a private conversation. Who knows? But why would a politician be calling a journalist who appears on MSNBC on a regular basis to sort of clue her in on what's going on here? Well, it's obvious why. You just saw why. So he could make his case to her, and if he's selected, she looks like she's smart by being able to rattle off his resume like that as if they're close personal friends. This is how it works. This is how the media works with Democrat politicians. Hand in glove. It's a revolving door. It's what Andrew Breitbart used to call the Democrat media complex. But the most insidious aspect of what goes on MSNBC is not the ones that we know about. I mean, we know who Molly Jong Fast is. We know who Mike Barnacle is. We know who Joe and Mika is. It's the pretend conservatives, the Republicans who have just had to walk away from the party because of Donald Trump. Of course, I'm talking about Charlie Sykes. Charlie Sykes, the voice of the Midwest, Milwaukee radio host who decided that he couldn't see his party ruined by Donald Trump. So they brought him on for the Republican perspective, because why would you bring on somebody on this show who actually voted for Donald Trump? That's irrelevant. No one cares what those people think. So here's Charlie Sykes, and you see the Axios headline they start with, which is actually, again, accidentally Axios had a truthful moment and an accurate moment. It's true. Republicans are breathing a sigh of relief with Tim Walz. Way better than Josh Shapiro as far as a Republican is concerned. So what did Charlie Sykes tell the MSNBC audience?
Going to play in the states that matter most in your community, in your state?
Well, initially, I admit that I was surprised and disappointed by this choice. I thought that Josh Shapiro was the more obvious choice. Walz is much more TBD. Sometimes governors have a hard time scaling up. And I think it's very, very important for this ticket to appeal and reach out to the center and to moderate voters. I thought they would have done that with Shapiro. I think it's more of a question mark with Walz. But I think you're asking exactly the right question here. How does this play? And it's funny. I wrote my Substack newsletter late last night. That maybe we're thinking about this all wrong, and I came down exactly where you are on all of this. That we're so used to thinking of this in ideological terms, when maybe it will be something else. Maybe it will be not decided on policy, but decided on personality and perception. His biography, the vibe that he gives out. He may have a very progressive governing record, but he reads moderate and he talks like a regular person rather than a politician, which will play well in rural areas. Look, there are three big constituencies here in All
right, now I'm going to let you finish there, but I hope you picked up on that. Oh, sure, he's a crazy left-wing radical and his policies are way over on the fringe, but he reads moderate. He comes across as moderate. And so therefore it'll work in rural areas. Like, again, this, Charlie Sykes from Milwaukee with his jacket and tie and his $100 haircut. He looks down his nose at those dairy farmers of Wisconsin because he truly thinks that all they care about is image and what you look like and whether you're plain spoken. I don't care what you stand for. That's truly what they think. That's the best spin they've got today, by the way. You'll see it elsewhere too. I can't remember who it was making the analysis, but they said, I think this is going to be like 1980 with Reagan, or it's going to be like 2008 with Obama. This is less about policy as it is about how the politician makes me feel. When that's the spin the next day, they're scared. You know that Kamala stepped in it, and they know that Kamala stepped in it. That's why they're working so hard to point out all of this surface stuff about Tim Walz and all of the stuff that really doesn't matter, but they're going to keep trying to sell you on it. That again, he's going to keep going, and I'll let him finish, but just listen for it. He reads moderate. He comes across this way. He plays this way. That's a fancy way of saying, well, he can deceive voters. He lies really, really well. That's what they're saying.
In Wisconsin, it's three crucial constituency. Number one is the Democratic base in Milwaukee and Madison. Can they generate enough enthusiasm to turn out big numbers? I think the indicators are right now, they're certainly headed in the right direction. Number two is the white rural vote that Democrats have been shedding. And Tim Walz can come in and he will speak their language. He may not have the policies, that might align, but he will speak their language. And then the third major constituency is the area I live in here around Milwaukee, which is the moderate, skeptical Republicans who have been drifting away from Donald Trump. And that's the big question mark. Will the Republicans be able to identify this ticket as cast it as this is a far left ticket? You may not like Trump, but this is way outside the norm. Or will this be, and I think your analogy is really powerful, like 1980, like 2008, where people were saying, I'm not voting on going down this menu of ideological issues. I just like these guys. I am tired of the status quo. I want something else, and I'm excited. And just one last point about...
Now I know who said it. I forgot I'd watched this video earlier. It was him who said it. That's what they're hoping for. I don't care about the... Trust me, when people voted for Ronald Reagan, they voted for policies. Trust me. They were voting against Jimmy Carter's policies because they had destroyed the country. Oh, and speaking of voting against Jimmy Carter policies, did you notice this if you watched the rally yesterday? And if you didn't, don't. I'll just tell you. Do you know how often these two heroic figures you see in front of you, how often they mentioned Joe Biden's name and Bidenomics and Joe Biden's policies and what Joe Biden, theoretically, this ticket is running on 4 more years. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? If so, here's who you want to vote for to keep the good times rolling. They don't want to talk about Joe Biden. They don't want to talk about Joe Biden at all. What does that tell you?
That rally, which was truly extraordinary. I mean, first of all, as I said before, governors often don't scale up. He looked ready for the moment, but that was the kind of energy you usually see in late October, not early August. And I am wondering what kinds of crowds he's going to turn out here in Michigan and Pennsylvania, because this enthusiasm is not speculative. It's real. It's there. And I'm going to be very interesting to see how it plays here.
Hey, everybody. Crowd size at rallies matters again. Didn't matter before. Now suddenly it matters. Now all we're going to hear, look at the size of that rally. Look at the size of the... No, I don't think so. Don't forget, the reason this rally was oversold and people were jammed in was because these Pennsylvanians thought that their governor was going to get the pick. And he was there. He gave his speech and proudly proclaimed how he was proud to be Jewish. Oh, I'm so sorry. He didn't say that. He said, I'm proud of my faith. Poor, sad, pathetic Josh Shapiro couldn't even proclaim himself Jewish on the stage before he introduced Kamala Harris and Tim Walz because he was told not to. Hey, Josh, let's not go there. Let's just keep that between us. You want one more MSNBC clip? All right, one more, only because it's really good. And it's not going to make you angry. It's actually going to, edify many of the things you already know about Tim Walz and about how this is not the pick. After everything that you just saw on MSNBC about how he's Mr. Normal and Mr. Moderate and Mr. Reach Out to the rural voters, and he's the one who's actually going to build the rural voters, Steve Karnecki decided to bring out his little magic touchscreen and take a look at Tim Walz's last election and how well he did with those very same rural voters in Minnesota. How do you think he did? Well, Steve, tell us the ugly truth.
Now, here's the key. because this county, Democrats used to be much more competitive in. Look at this. In 2012, Barack Obama won 43% of the vote in this county. It was only a little bit more than 10 points that he lost to Romney by here. The floor fell out for Democrats here when Trump came along in that Clinton race in 2016, and they haven't recovered it since. And that Walz performance here, it's a little less than Biden's number. It's more than Clinton's, and it's a far cry from what Obama was doing here. And again, I'm showing you one. This is a stand-in for dozens of counties in Minnesota where you saw the same thing with large rural populations, blue-collar white populations, where Obama, and some of them he was winning, others he was holding his own just a dozen years ago. This is where Democrats have lost ground. And Walz in 2022, he didn't gain any ground that the Democrats had lost. He didn't do that here. He didn't do that in other counties.
Now, this is at 10:30 this morning after the MSNBC viewers just saw 3 solid hours of Morning Joe and all of these idiots telling them that Tim Walz is going to be the magic bullet for blue-collar rural voters. And then here comes Steve Karnecki saying, hey, let's take a look at how he did when he ran for governor last time around with those very same voters that Mike Barnacle and Joe and Mika and Molly Jong-Fast and everybody else just told you that Tim Walz is going to absolutely clean up with. And it turns out he did horrible with those voters in his own state. So now those voters in Western Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin are going to say, well, yeah, absolutely. Let's go with Tim Walz. Really? Well, let's see.
Walz really owes his victory. That that margin, he got 8 points there statewide. He owes it to the Twin Cities area here, the area where Democrats in Minnesota and all these other states are already doing well. It's sort of it's the standard Democratic victory model in a state like this. It got Walz in 2022. This is the biggest county in the state. This is where Minneapolis is. Hennepin County. Walz wins this by 44 points. Look at all the votes that came out of their total. It's huge. And again, that's right in line with what Joe Biden did in 2020 when he won Minnesota. And again, just wind the clock back here. 12 years ago, this was still a blue county, but less blue. So it's the suburban areas, the metropolitan areas that have gotten much more blue. And Walz performed just like Biden did, better than Clinton did in places like this. And then in the rest of greater Minnesota, small town Minnesota, where the Democrats have been losing ground, Walz performed basically just like Biden did as well. So look at his electoral history. Tim Walz is in 2022. And the idea that he's got this automatic appeal with these small town areas in those 3 key battleground states, you don't see it in what he actually did on the ballot in 2022.
That's right. That's right. And, well, listen, anything can happen. I don't want to get too overconfident, but let me just say, as I said yesterday, Trump and Vance and Republicans and those who want to see a change in the White House, we dodged a huge bullet. And we owe a big thank you to all the Jew-hating anti-Semites in the Democrat Party who could not possibly stand having a Jewish man on the ticket, Josh Shapiro. Thanks, guys. You're doing great. Keep up that activism. Rashida Tlaib is now the most powerful Democrat in America. And now we're supposed to believe that this guy, Tim Walz, is going to be the magic bullet for Kamala Harris to win over those blue-collar rural towns that she really needs to win in Western Pennsylvania and in Michigan. And based on how he performed in Minnesota, all he's done here is basically shore up the same vote Kamala Harris already had. Detroit will absolutely go for Harris Walz. But when you go further out into Oakland County or further out into the, Kalamazoo area in Michigan, not so much. Not so much. So the one question on everybody's mind is, what will a debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance look like? And we had plenty of people speculating about it yesterday, mostly because Tim Walz, during the rally, raised the specter of that debate quite vividly. Watch this.
J.D. Vance literally wrote the foreword for the architect of the Project 2025 agenda. Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, JD studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on. That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
It's the see what I did there that's going to require a little bit of explanation, and I'll give it to you. But let's break this down really quickly, because the lies, the obfuscations, the disgusting, despicable slandering of JD Vance really requires a response. This guy is such a jerk. Honestly, does this guy remind? He's just like everybody's dad. He's not like my dad. He's not like my dad at all. You know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of the dad or the grandpa who hasn't really thought about politics much his entire life. He knows that his grandchildren or his daughter really is a Democrat. So he starts watching MSNBC, and he just loves that Lawrence O'Donnell guy. And so just to have a relationship and something to talk about his kids with, because he doesn't really care, he's decided to jump on board and be the cool MSNBC dad, who doesn't really stand for much, actually.
JD Vance literally wrote the foreword for the architect of the Project 2025 agenda. Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, JD studied at Yale.
So now this is interesting. First of all, it's remarkable to me that it's the liberal Democrats who are now degrading an Ivy League education. That's pretty. How many people who work in the Biden-Harris administration have a Yale or Harvard or Columbia degree? But now, if you go to Yale, it's a problem. And also, how insulting to people who grow up in the heartland that they can't get into an Ivy League institution, that they're not smart enough to get into an Ivy League institution, that they can't afford an Ivy League institution. What exactly is he saying with that statement? How disgustingly insulting. That's the word. How disgustingly insulting it is to the very men and women he's supposed to reach out and try to appeal to, by saying that there's something contrary to being from the heartland of America if you went to Yale. Excuse me, I'm curious, Governor Walz, would you say the same thing about West Point and the Naval Academy? Those are elite institutions too. Would someone from the heartland not want to go to those institutions? I'm just curious. Please explain yourself. But there's more lies.
Had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires. And then,
yeah. Oh, by the way, I love that. So suddenly we're against Silicon Valley billionaires. You know, the ones who doctor search engines and social media protocols to help Democrats get elected. Now they're the enemy. This guy is such a total fraud. I mean, from top to bottom, the man is a fraud. And we're now not supposed to celebrate somebody who starts a business from scratch with nothing and gets investments if the investments come from Silicon Valley. Okay? Just thanks for rewriting the rules for me. I just need to know what the scorecard is so I can play this game.
Wrote a bestseller trashing that community.
Now, that's the biggest lie of all. He wrote a bestseller. Anybody who has read Hillbilly Elegy knows that that was not trashing that community. They're trying to rewrite. You know, Hillbilly Elegy was praised by Morning Joe, by the way, and MSNBC. He was the favorite celebrity guest all year 2016. He was like the expert, JD Vance was, to please explain to us these rural voters in Appalachia. We don't understand why they're voting for Trump. I don't get it. They loved him. And Ron Howard directed the film version, which is actually very, very true to the book. Glenn Close, I believe, won an Emmy for her performance in that movie, or at the very least got nominated for it. So let me just be clear. Is Tim Walz and the Democrats now saying that this book that was celebrated in the publishing world and turned into a Ron Howard film, that film that Ron Howard made trashes the very community of Appalachia that it's supposed to depict? It's trashing them? Is that what I would love Ron Howard to reply to this, by the way. Hey, Ron, did you know that Tim Walz and the power brokers in the Democrat Party, Kamala Harris, thinks that your film trashed the people of Appalachia? Because I think actually you made a movie that showed them with great care, great respect. So here's what trashing the people in Appalachia is to Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. If you actually shine a light on how the elite globalist Democrat policies of the last 20 years have devastated that community and discarded the people who live there like trash, and thrown them some sort of jobs program saying learn to code while your entire community rusts out, while migration theory takes effect and your brightest, youngest college graduates leave your communities to coastal elite towns to get their degrees and stay there, unlike J.D. Vance, who actually came back with his degree and built a business in that area. While they have ruined Appalachia and small town America and Rust Belt America by offshoring all of the manufacturing to foreign countries or allowing illegal immigrants to come in and bring down their job market. Now, if you actually tell the story of what happened, you're trashing them. These are horrible people, absolutely horrible people. But then this last remark about debating.
That is if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
You see what I did there. See, when someone says you see what I did there, it means they've done some kind of pun or offhanded joke or a double entendre. And make no mistake, he did. You see, a reference to a couch in J.D. Vance is actually dwelling in a complete and total fabricated lie that was perpetrated by a social media user who claimed that there was a reference in Hillbilly Elegy and actually gave the page numbers as the reference, that J.D. Vance as a child had some sort of weird sexual thing with a sofa, with a couch. I'm sorry, I don't want to get into the details of it. It then got picked up by Kathy Griffin, who made it go viral without ever actually checking the book and the page reference. The whole thing was a lie. It was fabricated. Nothing in the book has any sort of reference in any way whatsoever, but it sort of took off. And everyone knows it's a lie. Everybody knows that it's a lie. Everybody knows it's not a fact. In fact, AP laughingly actually did a fact check with the headline, "No, J.D. Vance did not have sex with a couch." They actually deleted that fact check because they became a laughing stock. And now here's the man, the kind, decent, normal, Midwestern, rural voice that Kamala Harris has chosen for his temperament and his friendly nature, his Minnesota nice, repeating that lie to waves and gales of laughter and applause. You see what I did there? Yeah. Yeah, Tim, we see exactly what you did there. Oh, we sure saw exactly what you did. We're not going to forget what you did either. You know that whole when they go low, we go high. Yeah. Noted. Duly noted, Mr. Walz. Duly noted. That said, what will this debate look like? Well, let's check in on J.D. Vance. He did something today that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz haven't done. Kamala Harris hasn't done it since the moment she was hand-selected by a small number of very powerful Democrats and an even smaller number of very wealthy billionaires to be the new nominee for the Democratic Party without one Democrat in America actually casting a vote for her nomination. he actually took questions from reporters, something that those very same reporters would never demand Kamala Harris do. After all, I mean, what questions do we have for her? Oh, who does your hair? Who are you wearing? How excited are you to be a groundbreaking first woman of color president? You must be so excited. How are you even dealing with the excitement? These are the questions she'll get. But let's see what J.D. Vance had to say.
Sir.
Last night, Governor Walz suggested that because of your Ivy League education and your Silicon backing your political career, that you yourself are part of the elite. What are your first impressions of them trying to frame you this way to the American public?
Well, look, I came from a family where nobody in my family had ever gone to law school. I grew up in a poor family. The fact that Tim Walz wants to turn it into a bad thing, that I actually worked myself through college, through law school, and made something myself, to me, that's the American dream. And if Tim Walz wants to insult it, I think that's frankly pretty bizarre. Now, look, what really bothers me about Tim Walz, it's not even the positions that he's taken, though certainly he has been a far left radical. You know what really bothers me about Tim Walz as a Marine who served his country in uniform? When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with. I think it's shameful to prepare your unit to go to Iraq, to make a promise that you're going to follow through, and then to drop out right before you actually have to go. I also think it's dishonest. Something, again, if you guys ever get an opportunity to ask Tim Walz or Kamala Harris some questions, he made this interesting comment that the Kamala Harris campaign put out there, and I bet they're regretting they put it out there now, because he said that and he was making a point about gun control. He said we shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets. Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. And if he wants to criticize me for getting an Ivy League education, I'm proud of the fact that my mamaw supported me, that I was able to make something of myself. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service like he did.
So what was that, Tim Walz, about you saying you can't wait to debate J.D. Vance? We can't wait for you to debate J.D. Vance. Trust me on this. Oh, he's so normal. He's so moderate, and he's plain spoken, and he's going to really reach out to those rural voters. I wonder how those rural voters are going to react when they learn that after 24 years in the National Guard, as soon as his unit was called up to see real action in Iraq, he decided he was done, and he stepped aside and let his unit go without him, let another man take his place. And then he lies about his record, lies and says that he went to war, and he tells that lie while rationalizing taking away your guns. Oh, you shouldn't be able to have the same gun that I carried in war. You see, he says it that way because he pretends to have some sort of higher moral ground, right? I went to war, so I know better, and you can't criticize my position because I went to war. But you never did go to war. When you had the opportunity to go, you let someone take your place. Yeah, I'd love to see that moment on the debate stage. By the way, I understand what you're thinking right now. Oh, Larry, it's not just going to be J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz on the debate stage. No. You've also got the moderator from the corporate legacy left-wing media. So, it's not going to be even. Well, J.D. Vance is fine with handling the media too. Here's another moment from today's press conference in Detroit, Michigan.
Sir.
Senator Garrett Haake from NBC News. You have repeatedly suggested only reason Kamala Harris didn't pick Josh Shapiro to be her running mate is because of his Jewish faith. Do you have any evidence to support that assertion that a person who's married to a Jewish man is somehow anti-Semitic or bowing to anti-Semites?
Well, I reject the premise of the question. I did not say that was the only reason that Kamala Harris didn't choose Josh Shapiro. So you should, take a little less DNC talking points when you ask your questions and ask a real question. I have suggested that Kamala Harris was motivated, or at least her party was motivated by anti-Semitism. And the evidence that I offer for that is what
dozens of Democratic activists said in the run-up to her selecting her nominee. There were multiple grassroots activists, multiple media personalities, multiple people with influence in the Democrat Party who suggested that she should not choose Josh Shapiro because of his ethnic background. And look, I don't care what your ethnic background is. I know Donald Trump doesn't care what your ethnic background is. I do not want to live in a country where we're choosing who the next VP is based on skin color or ethnic heritage. Choose based on merit. And the fact that so many prominent leaders in the far left felt empowered to talk about Shapiro's ethnic heritage is a disgrace. And I think it's a scandal for the Democrat Party. Yes, I do.
Wow. This is a man who is standing there in Detroit, Michigan, at a microphone, taking questions from all the reporters without any notes in front of him, tangling it up with hostile questions from the reporters, responding in a very clear, articulate, and intelligent way, and holding his own, standing by what he believes, and going after his political opponent. He is so weird, isn't he? I mean, he compared to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, who can and have never done what you just saw in those two clips. He is, in fact, weird. I'm thinking, actually, they're onto something with the weirdness of JD Vance. Oh, I can't wait for that debate. I bet you can't wait for that debate. And I know. You're thinking to yourself, Larry, it's not just about how he does going up against Tim Walz. And it's not just about handling the left-wing liberal propaganda corporate moderator from NBC that they choose. No, Larry, what about all the gotcha questions that they're going to set up for him, especially about abortion? Because it's all going to be about abortion. Well, it's a fair point. Let's take a look at the last political debate J.D. Vance engaged in. It wasn't that long ago. It was in 2022 when he was running for Senate. And he was up against Congressman Tim Ryan, which, by the way, I just want to point out, Congressman Ryan from Ohio is actually a centrist moderate. He actually challenged Nancy Pelosi for the gavel in 2021, excuse me, because he knew that his party has gone way too far to the left. He actually does appeal to those very same centrist, moderate, rural voters that we're told Tim Walz will appeal to. Congressman Ryan actually is who they're claiming Tim Walz is. And by the way, J.D. Vance beat him handily in Ohio. So I think J.D. Vance might be able to appeal to those very same centrist, moderate, rural voters a little bit better, even than Mr. Ryan did. But the question came up about abortion and restrictions on abortion. And it came up in this Ohio debate because I don't know if you remember this issue, but after the Dobbs decision, and Ohio did enact under Governor DeWine some wonderfully restrictive abortion laws. And there was the story of a little girl who had been sexually assaulted and impregnated at a young age, something like 10 or 11 years old, and had to go across state lines to get an abortion. Do you remember this? And so this is the gotcha of all gotcha questions for somebody who supports restrictions on abortion. And whether you agree with J.D. Vance's position on this or not, that's irrelevant. What you need to see is how this debate is going to go when Walz and Vance finally are on the stage together. And you have to see how J.D. Vance will handle himself in these situations. So watch what he did in this debate. Yeah, I can't wait for the debate. I cannot wait for this debate. In fact, I am so excited about this debate. Despite Tim Walz getting lots of cheers and making his little joke about J.D. Vance getting off the couch and everyone being so excited about how fiery he is and how plain-spoken he is and how this debate's going to be great, let me tell you something. I rarely make predictions, although I was right about them getting rid of Joe and putting Kamala on the ticket. So sometimes my predictions come true. I don't think Tim Walz is ever going to agree to a debate with J.D. Vance. Ever. I think there's no chance Tim Walz wants to be on the same stage with that man and go head to head. He will be a mental midget compared to J.D. Vance. He will be a bumbling blowhard compared to J.D. Vance. They're all talk right now. There's lots of flexing going on. They are terrified, especially as the afterglow of yesterday's rally starts to burn away. And they actually start seeing how people are reacting to just how radical this political ticket is. This is the most radical, left-wing, borderline socialist political ticket ever presented to the American people in our history. And I have faith that this country is still the country of Ronald Reagan, Dwight Eisenhower, of Abraham Lincoln, of George Washington, and freedom for all. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you for watching. My name is Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.